Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics and would you believe it? So I did a video on the Letwin Amendment earlier on, and while I was upstairs doing the video and I went downstairs, my girlfriend said, "You won't believe what's just happened while you're up there." So Jacob Rees-Mogg has dropped a potential bombshell, which I'm going to have to go through in this video as well. But first, if you find yourself enjoying the video, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. So, first of all, a little bit of an update on the Letwin Amendment and how it might play out for a vote. Because remember, at the moment, we don't quite know if there's even a majority that would vote in favour of Boris Johnson's deal, because Boris Johnson pulled that vote today. I wasn't sure he'd be able to. He obviously was. So the Letwin Amendment was the only vote that took place today. So Boris Johnson's deal basically has been amended, and Boris Johnson doesn't want it to be amended, so he didn't put that forward for a vote. But for those interested, the result was 322 in favour of this motion. And what this motion effectively does, remember, all it does is it basically is MPs saying, before we vote on this deal, we want to see the wording of the legislation necessary to pass it. That's all. That's all it does. It basically says we want time to be able to look at it. And you haven't even published it yet, Mr. Johnson. And that's true. They haven't published the withdrawal bill, and people need to be able to see it. And there isn't time to see it. So it's basically Boris Johnson has to send off that letter now. I think he will. For all of his talk about no more delays and I'm not going to negotiate, he will send it off, I feel. I feel he will. But if he doesn't, then the judges will just say on Monday what they're going to do about it. It will be sent off then. The people who voted for it, so of the 306 who voted against the motion, shall we say, it was all Conservatives plus some independent, 17 independent MPs who were former Conservatives, and I think one Labour. And then it was 6 Labour rebels. Now this is where the focus is, the 6 Labour rebels, because these could be the one that send this deal through. And even though it'll be principally Conservatives voting for it, Labour will be the ones who get the blame, of course, because, well, Conservatives are pro-Brexit largely. So, but Labour are not. So the Labour rebels, the usual suspects. You could have said these beforehand: Kevin Barron, Ronnie Campbell, Jim Fitzpatrick, Caroline Flint, Kate Hoey, of course, you shouldn't even be a Labour MP, and John Mann. This is a mixture of ones who are themselves Brexiteers and don't care what their constituents think, and ones in Leave constituencies who think they will lose their seat at the next election. It's purely selfish. Think they'll lose their seat at the next election if they don't vote in this way. What they're forgetting is that even in a Leave constituency, the bulk of their voters will still be Remain, because they're Labour voters and the bulk of Labour are Remain. And although it may be true that some of the Leave supporting Labour voters may turn away from them in the next election, what they're not thinking about is that Remain ones may also turn away. And I'll tell you something. If you're a Labour voter and heavily Remain, particularly if you're on the centre-left as opposed to the far left, you are much more likely to vote Liberal Democrat than a Labour Leave voter is to vote, say, Conservative. I mean, they may vote Brexit Party. We don't even know if the Brexit Party are going to be putting up candidates in places. So this is actually foolish, but nonetheless, that's what they're doing. So then what happened is Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Leader of the House, basically a few people had their say, and then all the Conservatives, or almost all of them, filed out, pissed off. Then Jacob Rees-Mogg came back in to say that he's going to put up this same motion to vote again on Monday. So basically what they want to do is work on people over the weekend. They know the numbers now. There were 322 in favour of the motion. So they need to at least stop 3 of those voting for it. And there were, I reckon, 11 abstentions. Whether that was 11 MPs who weren't there on that day or just didn't go through one of the lobby doors, I don't know. So that's what they need to work on, really, getting those people, I suppose, on board. Which is quite a lot. I'm not sure how they can do that. But it's their intention to work on them this weekend and get it reversed on Monday. Now, what was particularly disgraceful about this, and it prompted some debate afterwards, is that Jacob Rees-Mogg he's basically suggesting a motion for Monday. So what he should have done was to come in and present it as a business motion, which of course would have meant that he'd then have to answer questions from MPs in the House. But he didn't. He just came in and announced it as a point of order. He just stated it. So in other words, I mean, this may not even go through. There's a few things about this. First of all, does this allow Boris Johnson to not sign the letter? No, because the law says he has to sign it by midnight tonight. That's UK time, as people have pointed out. Some of these things related to Brexit are 11 p.m, but that's because Central European time is 1 hour ahead. And if it's in EU law, then of course it's based on Central European time. But the Ben Act is UK law. It's based on UK time, which at the moment is British summertime for another week. So, yeah, it's midnight tonight. And he will, I'm sure he will do it. Because if he doesn't, then Monday morning, there's, Joanna Cherry herself has said, I'm sure there'll be plenty of others going there, will get the order from the judges, who will have already made their decision, they just haven't announced it yet, and carry out that order. So that means the letter will have been sent off by noon on Monday. So before MPs ever get to debate anything else on Monday, that letter's sent off. But that's not what Boris Johnson's aiming to scupper. And as I say, I believe that he will send it off himself, absolutely. And what he's aiming to do is to stop the European leaders from granting an extension to begin with. He will doubtless sort of say to them, can you not react to this too quickly? And they probably won't, because remember, from the EU leaders' point of view, they can see the votes are tight. There is a possibility this deal goes through. Now, I think they'd have been a bit foolish because it is a route to no deal. The fact that Boris Johnson opposed this motion today and that he is desperate not to allow this motion can only mean one thing. He wants his no-deal Brexit this month still. So I was talking about the fact he may have given up on that and be just looking to get us out with no deal at the end of the transition period. That doesn't appear to be what the case, because otherwise he'd have no problem with this motion. This motion doesn't stop the deal going through. It just means MPs want to look at the legislation before they vote on it. That's all. Yes, there's a certain political risk with that, because once they read it, they'll see how terrible it is. We all know how terrible it is anyway, but more of it will get out into the public. But does that matter? He's been ignoring the public anyway. There's potentially in excess of 1 million people right now in London marching for a public vote again, as has happened before. It's quite clear what the will of the people is. He doesn't care whether more of the public would turn against his deal. He doesn't give a crap. So I'm not quite sure what the issue is there, other than he just wants to take us out with no deal still this October. That's the only reading I can put on it. So the aim is that the letter gets sent off. He doesn't care about that as long as an extension request doesn't come back quickly, which it may not. And then he reverses this motion, puts his deal through, that the deal goes through. And if he can reverse the motion, it probably would, because that's an indication that there's MPs willing to put it through. And then he can retract the letter. And he can do that perfectly legally. As soon as Parliament votes for a deal, he can retract that letter. The problem is that he can't put that deal in front of them just yet because it's been amended to still require the extension. So that's his issue with it. Now, can he do this? The problem is, if they intend to put exactly the same motion in front of Parliament on Monday, it should be denied by the Speaker. On potentially a few bases, but on one of them definitely, is the fact that you are not allowed to put up substantively the same motion again in front of Parliament that has already been debated and voted on in the same session of Parliament. So it's already been debated and voted on today. He cannot put the same motion up on Monday. So I suppose what he would need is a motion that would cancel this amendment without being the same amendment. So I don't know how he thinks that's going to go through. But even if it does, I mean, it doesn't mean, even if he gets to have it debated and voted on again on Monday, it doesn't mean it's a complete disaster for the people who won today, because he's still got to overturn 14 MPs at least. He needs 14 MPs. He needs the 11 MPs who abstained and at least 3 of the ones who voted in favour of the motion to change their mind, as well as all of the ones who voted against it to still vote against it. But he seems to have that in the bag. Now, I don't know that that's terribly realistic. I don't know that that's realistic. But again, this is a reaction thing, I think. And even if he does, It's not certain that people would vote in favour of the deal, but it probably would be an indicator that they would. And there you are. Now, from the extension point of view, until the extension has been written into UK law at any time that Boris Johnson gets Parliament to approve of a deal, he can retract that extension request. So, again, he has to remove this amendment first. So we could do with the EU responding fairly quick with an extension, at which point Boris Johnson has to bring it before Parliament within 2 days, and then they vote on it. As soon as it's written into law, that's it, the extension is done. So it's going to be a bit of a wait. I strongly suspect the EU are not going to rush. I would suspect they may not come back with the extension until the end of next week. I do think they will come back with one. I know a lot of people have been saying, I said this in the last video, that the EU have been pouring water on the idea of another extension. I don't believe that's actually the case. I think that's just for public consumption. But we'll see what we see anyway. So it's going to be a very interesting day on Monday. I'm not at work on Monday, so I get to actually report properly as if I'm going to be full-time, which I will be in January. Hope you found the video interesting, on the events of today interesting. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.